The vastness of space had always been silent, but on one ordinary night that silence broke. A strange signal appeared in the outer sensors of Earth's deep space exploration vessel, Aurora 17. It wasn't the kind of transmission anyone expected to find. It was old, weak and fading, like an echo trying to reach across centuries. The crew didn't know what it meant, but something about it felt alive. Inside the control room, the crew gathered around the flickering holographic screen. The signal pulsed faintly, carrying strange tones that didn't fit any known pattern. No translation system could make sense of it. It wasn't a distress beacon from a human ship, nor any alien race they'd encountered before. It was completely unknown. The team decided to record the message and send it to Earth for analysis. But one of the crew members, a quiet linguist named Elena, couldn't let it go. She had a habit of seeing meaning where others saw noise. For her, language was more than words, it was emotion, history, and hope. She asked the captain for permission to work on the message herself. Every night while the others slept, she stayed in front of her console, replaying the signal again and again. The sound was haunting, slow, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat mixed with sorrow. She filtered frequencies, rearranged pulses, and looked for patterns hidden beneath layers of interference. Days turned into weeks. Most of the crew lost interest, thinking it was just a random burst of radiation from a dead satellite. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, had tried to speak. She began to dream about it, voices calling through static, whispering for help. One night, when she was alone in the lab, something changed. A new translation layer matched a segment of the signal. A faint voice came through, trembling and broken. "We are dying. Please remember us." Elena froze. The words were clear enough to send chills through her entire body. She played it again, making sure it wasn't a software glitch. The same words echoed, soft but real. She ran to the captain's quarters and played the message for him. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he simply said, "Prepare a report for Earth." Within hours, the discovery spread through every channel. Earth Space Research Council demanded immediate details. Who were these beings? How old was this message? And most of all, where did it come from? After analyzing the signal's trajectory, the crew found its origin. A dying planet located at the edge of a forgotten star system. The planet's name, as translated from the data embedded in the signal, was Virelion. The decision was made quickly. The Aurora 17 would alter course and travel to the source. No one could ignore a message that might be the final words of an intelligent species. The journey to Virelion took months. The crew watched the stars drift past, wondering what kind of civilization they were about to meet. Or mourn. The deeper they went into that part of space, the quieter it became. There were no trade routes, no satellites, no signs of life. It was like entering a forgotten corner of the universe. When they finally reached Virelion, the sight took everyone's breath away. The planet floated like a dark pearl, half shrouded in mist. Its atmosphere was thin, unstable, and streaked with strange blue clouds that glowed faintly against the void. From orbit, they could see vast patches of land scorched black, as if entire continents had burned long ago. Elena stared at the surface, feeling something heavy in her chest. "It looks like it's been dead for centuries," she whispered. The captain ordered a landing near what seemed to be the ruins of a city. As the ship descended through the cloudy sky, lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating massive structures half buried under ash and rock. They weren't natural formations. These were buildings, towers and monuments, all crafted with delicate, curved designs that shimmered faintly when the light hit them. When the crew stepped out, the air was cold and thin. The ground was covered in gray dust, but beneath it, fragments of glass-like material reflected their suits' lights. The silence was absolute. Even their footsteps seemed to fade quickly, as if the planet itself had forgotten the sound of life. They began exploring the ruins. Broken pillars, collapsed domes, and strange symbols covered every wall. Some of the architecture still glowed faintly, powered by remnants of an ancient energy source. Elena brushed her gloved hand across one of the symbols. It looked almost like writing, but more fluid and organic than anything human. They discovered what looked like a hall of records, a massive underground chamber filled with crystal-like devices. When they powered one up, holograms flickered to life around them. The room was suddenly filled with translucent figures, tall, slender beings with gentle faces and luminous eyes. Their voices were soft and melodic. For the first time, the crew saw the Varelians. The hologram showed them teaching, singing, building, and sharing knowledge. It was clear they had been a peaceful civilization, focused on art, science, and community. But the images soon shifted. The skies turned red. Warships appeared in orbit. The Varelians were seen fleeing, hiding, and trying to preserve their archives. Their final message, "Please remember us," appeared at the end, glowing like a desperate farewell. Elena felt tears well up in her eyes. "They didn't die in war," she said quietly. They were erased, no one spoke. The silence carried more meaning than words ever could. They realized they were standing on the grave of a forgotten people who had been wiped from history. When they returned to the ship, the mood was heavy. They recorded everything they could and sent it to Earth. But even as the data transmitted, Elena kept replaying the holograms. Something about the Varelians' faces haunted her. They looked kind, too kind for the cruelty that had destroyed them. Days later, a reply came from Earth's council. The discovery was confirmed as genuine. The message was at least 40,000 years old. Every major power on Earth wanted to claim the find for themselves. Scientific groups, historians, even corporations. Some saw it as a chance for glory, others for profit. But Elena saw something else. She saw a promise. These beings had reached out in their final moments, asking not for rescue, but for remembrance. That small human-like plea touched her deeply. One evening, she sat near a viewing window watching the distant stars. "They were forgotten," she whispered. "But maybe they don't have to be anymore." As she stared into the darkness, a faint glimmer caught her eye, a soft blue light flickering from the planet below. The captain confirmed it wasn't a reflection or a glitch. Something deep beneath the ruins was still active, like a heartbeat refusing to stop. The crew decided to investigate one last time before leaving orbit. What they found would change everything. Beneath the city, they uncovered a chamber filled with sleeping pods, thousands of them, all empty. But one was still sealed. Inside it, faintly glowing, was a single figure, the last Varelian. The life readings were weak but present. After tens of thousands of years, one of them was still alive. Elena's voice trembled as she whispered, "They weren't all gone." For the first time in human history, humanity stood face to face with the last survivor of a forgotten alien race. And in that moment, the story of the universe quietly began to change. No one spoke. They all just stood there, staring at the fragile being inside the pod, suspended in a light that pulsed like a heartbeat. It wasn't just science anymore. It wasn't discovery. It was something far greater. It was responsibility. And none of them knew yet how deeply that choice, to remember, to help, to stand, would shape the future of both species. The discovery of the sleeping alien being inside that glass pod changed everything. The crew who once thought they were just explorers now felt like protectors of a secret too sacred to belong to anyone else. The fragile body inside the pod was motionless, glowing softly in a pale blue light. The readings showed a heartbeat, faint but steady. Somehow, against all odds, this being had survived tens of thousands of years. The team worked carefully, setting up medical scanners and environmental stabilizers around the pod. The captain ordered complete silence as the process began. The atmosphere inside the chamber was heavy. No one dared to speak above a whisper. They all knew that one wrong move could destroy the last remaining trace of a civilization lost to time. Elena watched the being closely. Its face was peaceful, almost human, but more delicate. The skin shimmered faintly like glass, and faint patterns of light moved beneath it like veins carrying soft energy instead of blood. Its long fingers were folded gently over its chest, and around its neck hung a small pendant with unfamiliar markings. Even though no one could read the symbols, something about them felt personal, like a reminder of home. After hours of monitoring, the ship's AI confirmed that the being's body was in a state of suspended animation. It wasn't truly alive or dead, just waiting for something or someone to awaken it. Elena sat beside the pod for hours. "Why were you left behind?" she whispered softly. "What were you hoping we'd find?" There was no answer, only the slow rhythm of the pod's inner light. The next morning, the captain called for a meeting. "We've scanned the entire city," he said, projecting holographic images across the room. "The structures are millions of years old, but the technology is still partially active. The energy cores are buried deep, and they're still functioning somehow. We've also found more archives, records of their culture, language, and history. The crew leaned closer, watching as the holograms played scenes from the Varelian past. The images showed cities floating above oceans of light, vast gardens that stretched across entire continents, and tall towers filled with crystal-like energy. The Varelians were clearly advanced, but what stood out most was not their machines, it was their kindness. The records showed gatherings where they shared songs, taught young ones, and cared for other species that visited their planet. They were peaceful, one of the engineers said softly. No sign of military structures or weapons. Elena nodded. They built a world meant for learning, not fighting. But as the holograms continued, the mood changed. The skies darkened and a new kind of ship appeared, sharp, metallic, and cold. It wasn't Varelian. The recordings showed the invaders descending from orbit, burning the skies with beams of light. The peaceful cities crumbled as the Varelians fled underground. Their last messages were filled with confusion, sorrow, and disbelief. They hadn't even understood why they were being attacked. They were destroyed, Elena whispered, her eyes fixed on the final images, not because they fought, but because they refused to. It was a quiet kind of tragedy, one that didn't shout but stayed heavy in the air. The recordings ended with the same words that had started it all. "We are dying. Please remember us." The room fell silent. Every member of the crew understood now. They weren't just explorers on a scientific mission. They were witnesses to the final chapter of an entire race. After the meeting, the captain contacted Earth's council and sent all the findings. The reply came back hours later. The message was full of technical orders and political cautions. "Do not attempt to revive the being," the message said. "Preserve and return the pod for study. Further action will be determined after council review." Elena read the message and felt something twist inside her. "For study," she repeated quietly. "They're already talking about it like an object." The captain sighed. "You know how it works. They'll want to test it, analyze it, and learn from it." "Learn what?" she said. "How to be human. Because that's what this is about. They asked us to remember them." "That's all?" The captain didn't reply. He just looked at the pod and said softly, "Sometimes remembering isn't easy." Over the next few days, the crew continued to explore. They found strange structures buried beneath the city, temples, libraries, and gardens preserved by an unknown technology. Each place told a story of who the Varelians were. In one chamber, they discovered murals made of glowing stone, showing scenes of harmony between species. Different creatures from other worlds standing beside the Varelians, exchanging gifts and songs. They weren't conquerors or warriors. They had been mediators, peacemakers, healers. But the most haunting discovery came when they found a circular platform at the center of the ruins. When activated, it projected a map of the galaxy. Dozens of glowing dots appeared, each representing a star system. Most of them were dark. Only a few still shimmered faintly. Elena stared at it. "These must have been their allies," she said quietly. "Other worlds they connected with." The engineer shook his head. "If that's true, then most of their allies are gone too." The thought sank deep into everyone's hearts. The Varelians hadn't just been forgotten. The entire network of civilizations they had once touched was gone. Time, war, and greed had erased them all. That night, while the rest of the crew rested, Elena sat beside the sleeping being once again. The pod emitted a soft hum that filled the room with calm light. She placed her hand gently against the glass. "You must have believed someone would come," she whispered. "That's why you waited." She felt a faint warmth under her palm, like the being could somehow hear her. For a moment, she imagined what it must have been like to watch everything you loved disappear, to send a message into the stars, hoping that someday someone might care enough to answer. When the Aurora 17 prepared to leave orbit, they packed all the recovered data and samples. The planet below was silent again, its secrets stored safely aboard their ship. But before departure, Elena requested one last scan. As the sensors swept across the surface, a faint energy reading appeared near the northern mountains. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic. The captain approved a small expedition. When they arrived at the site, they found a massive stone gate carved into the mountain face. It opened with a soft vibration when they approached. Inside, thousands of small crystalline containers lined the walls, each glowing faintly. Inside each one was a small seed, bright, pulsing, and alive. "These are not weapons," Elena said, her voice trembling. "They're memories. Biological memory capsules. They realized what they were seeing. The Varelians had tried to preserve their entire culture inside these living seeds. Each seed held DNA, data, and encoded memories. They had been trying to keep their world alive, even if they couldn't survive themselves. The captain ordered the team to collect as many as they could. They packed them carefully, knowing that these small glowing seeds might hold the story of an entire species. When the ship lifted off, the planet looked quiet once again. But this time it didn't seem empty. It felt as though it was watching them leave, grateful that someone had finally come. As they entered orbit, Elena looked out of the window. "We can't just hand them over," she said softly. "If we give everything to the council, it'll become politics, ownership, and control. They'll take credit, not responsibility." The captain sighed. "We'll report everything. But maybe we'll decide how much they actually need to know." Elena turned toward him, surprised. For the first time, she saw something different in his eyes. Not just duty, but understanding. When the message was finally sent back to Earth, it only contained part of the truth. It reported the ruins, the data, and the pod, but not the seeds. The crew agreed to keep those hidden until they knew what Earth planned to do. Over the following weeks, the ship continued its journey home. The pod remained stable, the sleeping Varelian unchanged. But something subtle began to happen. The energy readings were increasing. It was as if the being could sense movement again, as if it knew that the darkness it had waited through for ages was finally ending. One night, while Elena was monitoring the pod, a faint voice echoed through the ship's intercom. It wasn't human, but it was clear and gentle. "Light has returned." The systems flickered for a moment, and then the voice faded. The AI confirmed it hadn't been a glitch. The sound had come from inside the pod. Everyone rushed to the medical bay. The lights inside the pod pulsed faster now, like a heartbeat coming back to life. The glass fogged slightly, and the being's fingers twitched just once, but enough to make everyone freeze. After thousands of years of silence, the last Varelian was waking up. Elena stood there, speechless, tears forming in her eyes. She didn't feel fear, only awe. They had come searching for a signal from the past, and what they found was a new beginning. As the ship drifted among the stars, the crew realized that they weren't just bringing home history. They were carrying hope. The forgotten race was not forgotten anymore. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by starlight, humanity's heart grew a little bigger, ready to remember, ready to protect, and ready to stand for. When the last Varelian opened its eyes, everything on board the Aurora 17 changed. It happened slowly at first. The faint blue glow inside the pod brightened until the entire room shimmered like water reflecting sunlight. Then the glass softened and slid open with a quiet hiss. A wave of cool air spread out, carrying a scent like rain and metal mixed together. The crew stood frozen, watching in complete silence. The being inside took its first breath in what must have been thousands of years. Its chest rose gently and a soft sound came from its lips. Not words, but something between a sigh and a melody. It blinked a few times, and when its eyes opened, everyone gasped. They weren't one color. They shifted with the light, glowing between blue, green, and silver. For a long moment, it looked around, confused but calm. Then its gaze stopped on Elena. Somehow, even without language, there was understanding. The Varelian tilted its head slightly, as if recognizing her face from somewhere far away in memory. Elena slowly stepped forward. "It's okay," she said quietly, not sure if it would understand. "You're safe." The being raised a trembling hand and touched the edge of the pod. Its fingers glowed faintly where they met the air. Then, in a voice that was soft but clear, it spoke. The language was alien, but the ship's translator caught enough fragments to form a simple sentence. "Who remembers us?" No one moved. The question hung in the air like a fragile piece of glass. Elena swallowed hard. "We do," she whispered. "Humans. We found your message." The being looked down and a single line of light ran down its cheek, almost like a tear made of energy. After that moment, everything happened quickly. Medical teams checked its vital signs. The council back on Earth demanded constant updates. The discovery of a living alien from an ancient civilization became the biggest event in human history. Every news channel on Earth ran stories about the Aurora 17 people, flooded the networks with excitement, hope, and fear. Some called it a miracle. Others warned it could be dangerous. But for the crew, especially Elena, it wasn't about politics or fear. It was about promise. The Varelians slowly began to learn. It was weak but intelligent, absorbing information through visual and audio symbols faster than any human could. Within days, it started forming short sentences in English. It called itself Area. The name came from a word in its own language meaning light that stays after darkness. Area's voice was soft, like wind through glass. It spoke little, but every word carried emotion. It told them fragments of its memory, how the Varelians had been a peaceful people who built songs instead of weapons, gardens instead of armies. But they had refused to join a galactic war between powerful empires. For that choice, they were erased. Elena listened in silence every time Area spoke. There was no anger in its voice, only sorrow. "We had no allies," Area said one evening. "No one stood for peace. They called us weak. We believed time would forgive them, but time forgot us instead." Those words stayed with Elena long after she left the room. When Aurora 17 finally returned to Earth, the ship was met by hundreds of government officials, scientists, and security forces. The world wanted to see the alien, but Area wasn't ready. Its body was still fragile, its mind slowly adjusting to the flood of new sensations. The council decided to keep it under observation in a special facility, guarded day and night. They said it was for protection, both for Area and for humanity, but Elena knew it was more about control. During the first press briefing, the council presented the discovery as a triumph of human science. They praised the crew, the technology, and the mission, but no one mentioned the Varelians' plea to be remembered. They spoke about samples, data, and interstellar opportunities, but not compassion. That night, Elena sat alone in her small apartment, watching the broadcast replay. Every sentence made her feel colder. The message had been clear. This wasn't a rescue story anymore. It was a claim. Humanity had found something ancient and valuable, and now it belonged to them. The next day, she went to visit Area in the facility. It was a quiet room filled with soft lights and transparent walls. Area sat near the window staring at the sky. When Elena entered, it turned and smiled faintly. "Your world is bright," it said. "But your people speak with divided hearts," Elena sighed. "They're afraid. Sometimes when humans don't understand something, they try to control it." Area looked thoughtful. "Fear is heavy," it said, "but hope is heavier, if you choose to carry it." Those words broke something inside her. She realized that Area, even after everything, still believed in kindness, and that made her want to fight for it even more. Over the next few weeks, debates broke out across the planet. Scientists wanted to study Area's biology. Military officials wanted to know if its technology could be used for defense. Politicians wanted to use the discovery for power. The world had split into groups, those who wanted to protect Area, and those who saw it as a resource. One evening, Elena was invited to speak before the Global Council. She stood in a massive hall surrounded by delegates from every major nation. Cameras broadcast the session across the world. The council chair asked her directly, "Why should humanity risk its stability for a being that offers us nothing in return?" Elena took a deep breath. "Because they asked for something we forgot how to give," she said softly. "Not power, not wealth, just remembrance. When they sent that message into space, they weren't asking for rescue. They were asking to not disappear completely. And if we ignore that, if we treat them like an experiment, then we'll prove that humanity hasn't changed at all." The hall went quiet. Some delegates looked moved, others uncomfortable. She continued, "We can study, learn, and explore, but not without empathy. We found the last voice of a peaceful race. That's not a scientific opportunity. That's a responsibility." Her words spread across the world like fire. People began to speak up online, creating movements and art to honor the Varelians. Children drew pictures of Area, and teachers spoke about what it meant to be remembered. Humanity, for the first time in decades, was united not by war or fear, but by compassion. But the opposition was strong too. Some leaders warned that defending Area would make Earth a target for the same powers that once destroyed the Varelians. "We can't risk it," one general said. "Their enemies might still be out there." Area heard those fears but remained calm. "If danger returns," it said, "I will not hide. I have slept enough. Now I wish to see your stars." The scientists were amazed by how quickly it adapted. It started helping them understand old Varelian data, showing them how its people used energy not by burning or mining, but by harmonizing vibrations in matter itself. It wasn't magic. It was science rooted in balance. But what fascinated Elena most wasn't the technology. It was how Area treated every person it met, always with kindness, never with pride. It didn't speak of vengeance or sorrow. It only wanted to teach what its people had once believed, that knowledge without compassion destroys itself. Despite all the warnings, a growing number of humans began to side with Area. Artists, teachers, and even soldiers wrote messages of support. They saw in Area a reminder of what humanity could still become. Months later, the Global Council met again. This time they faced a choice. Some wanted to close the project and seal the Virelian technology forever, claiming it was too risky. Others wanted to open an exchange program, a chance for humans to learn from what remained of that ancient race. Elena stood in the center of the hall once more, holding one of the glowing seeds they had found on Virelion. "This," she said, lifting it gently, "is not a weapon. It's a memory. If we lock it away, it will die like the planet it came from. But if we nurture it, maybe it can grow again, just like compassion can." The silence that followed was deep and heavy. And then, slowly, people began to nod. The council voted, not unanimously, but with enough hearts on the side of hope. Earth would protect Area. The Virelian archives would not be hidden or weaponized. They would be shared openly with the world. When Elena told Area the news, it closed its eyes and whispered, "The stars remember." That night, the first human Virelian research colony was approved to be built near Virelion's orbit. Scientists, engineers, and volunteers from Earth would go back, not to conquer, but to care. Area smiled when it heard that. "Then my people are not lost," it said softly. "They are simply waiting to be understood." For the first time, Elena felt proud of humanity, not for its power, but for its heart. The forgotten race that once had no allies now had one. And it was humanity. And in that small victory, somewhere deep in the stars, the silence of the universe seemed to lift, as if it, too, was beginning to remember. Months passed after the Global Council's decision to protect Area and the memory of the Virelians. For the first time in many years, Earth felt united for something greater than itself. Scientists worked day and night decoding the remaining Virelian archives. Engineers built new energy systems inspired by their peaceful technology. And across the world, people spoke with a sense of wonder again, as if humanity had finally found its purpose among the stars. But peace never lasts without a test. It started when long-range satellites picked up unknown signals near the outer edge of the solar system. At first they were faint, background noise like the whisper of distant thunder. But soon the signals grew stronger, clearer, and closer. When the messages were finally decoded, they carried a warning that chilled every expert who read it. The transmissions came from a powerful alien coalition known as the Syndic. They were a group of empires that had once ruled the outer sectors of the galaxy, and they remembered the Virelians. The message was simple but firm. Leave Virelion untouched. The past must remain buried. If humanity interferes, consequences will follow. It was not a threat spoken in anger. It was a statement of ownership, cold and absolute. The Global Council gathered urgently. Leaders from every nation appeared on screens across the world, their faces tense. No one had seen the Syndic for centuries, but the stories about them had never disappeared. They were known for dominance, not diplomacy. Wherever they went, resistance rarely survived. Some leaders immediately called for caution. "We can't risk war," they said. "Our technology isn't strong enough to fight a galactic power. We should stop all missions to Virelion and surrender the archives." Others disagreed. "If we back down now," one general argued, "we'll be showing the universe that Earth's compassion can be threatened." "We didn't go to Virelion for power. We went for truth." Area was brought into the discussion. It sat quietly in the meeting hall, its calm presence standing out against the noise of human fear. When the council members asked what the Syndic wanted, Area answered in its soft, melodic tone. "They want silence," it said. "They fear memory. They fear the truth that peace once existed without them." The room went still. Area continued. "The Virelians refused to join their wars. That was our only crime. We believed life did not need masters, and for that they erased us. If you stop now, you will not be safe. You will simply be silent, as we were." Those words sank deep into every listener's heart. Even the council leaders who were afraid could not deny the weight behind them. But still, fear ruled most of the decisions. The Council decided to suspend further exploration of Virelion until more could be learned about the Syndic's forces. Ships were ordered to stay within Earth's boundaries, and the research colony project was paused. Elena couldn't accept that. She had spent months studying the Virelion archives, learning about their harmony-based technology and their peaceful history. She knew this wasn't just about science anymore. It was about moral duty. That night, she met Arya in the observation dome, where the stars shone brighter than city lights. "They're scared," she said quietly. "They think giving up will keep us safe." Arya looked out at the stars. "Fear builds walls," it said. "But walls do not last forever. Only those who stand for something remain remembered." Elena nodded. "So we stand." The next morning, she and a small team of volunteers secretly reactivated the Aurora 17. The ship had been grounded after the Council's order, but its systems were still intact. They didn't plan to fight. They just wanted to return to Virelion and protect what they could before the Syndic arrived. When the ship lifted off from Earth's orbit, the stars seemed to move faster than ever. Each one felt like a witness to what was coming. As Aurora 17 approached the edge of known space, the crew detected movement. Large ships, dark and silent, floating like shadows. The Syndic fleet had already arrived near Virelion. Their vessels were massive, shaped like black wings spread across the void. Elena's heart pounded as she stared at the radar. "They're blocking the planet," she said. Arya stepped closer to the screen. "They will destroy what's left if we do nothing." The captain of the Aurora 17 hesitated. "We can't outfight them," he said. "Our weapons won't even scratch those ships." Arya placed a hand over the console, and for a moment the entire bridge dimmed. Its eyes glowed faintly. "You do not need to fight as they do," it said. "Your ship carries the voice of my people. That is stronger than any weapon." Arya then revealed something the crew hadn't known. When they had recovered the Virelion archives, they had also unknowingly restored an ancient defense network, a planetary shield hidden beneath the planet's crust. It had been designed to protect Virelion's core from cosmic storms, but it could also repel attacks. The system was still alive, waiting to be reawakened. "We can connect it through your ship," Arya explained, "but it will require trust between human and Virelion energy. It is not machine alone. It listens to will." The crew exchanged nervous glances, but Elena stepped forward first. "Then we trust," she said, "because that's all we have left." Together, they began the process. Cables linked Arya's biological energy core to the ship's main reactor. The ship trembled as the two systems merged. Lights flickered, alarms sounded, but Arya remained calm. "Do not fear the storm," it said. "It remembers peace." Outside, the Syndic fleet began to move closer. Their ships charged their weapons, lighting up the darkness with red beams ready to strike. Then the planet below Virelion glowed. Soft blue lines spread across its surface like veins waking from a long sleep. The glow rose higher until it formed a shimmering dome around the planet. When the Syndic's first energy blast hit the shield, it scattered into harmless sparks. The shield held. Inside the Aurora 17, the crew watched in disbelief. Elena whispered, "It's alive." Arya nodded slowly. "Virelion still remembers its promise, to protect life, not destroy it." The Syndic fleet fired again and again, but the ancient shield reflected every attack. Finally, their commander sent a message across the communication channel. The voice that came through was cold and commanding. "You have interfered with matters beyond your world. Humanity will pay for this." Elena stepped forward, her voice steady. "We don't want war. We only want to protect what deserves to live, what you tried to erase." There was silence. Then the voice replied, "You are defending ghosts." Arya spoke next. "Ghosts are only forgotten lives that someone loved, and now they are remembered." For the first time, the Syndic commander hesitated. The Virelion voice, calm, pure, and unmistakably real, echoed through every ship in their fleet. They had believed the Virelions gone forever. The proof that one still lived broke something inside their arrogance. The battle never fully began. After hours of silence, the Syndic ship slowly began to retreat. Whether out of confusion, fear, or respect, no one knew. But when the last one disappeared into the dark, the universe suddenly felt lighter. The Aurora 17 remained in orbit for days, watching over the glowing planet. The ancient defense system slowly dimmed again, settling into quiet peace. When the crew finally returned to Earth, the news spread faster than light. Humanity had faced one of the galaxy's oldest powers, and hadn't bowed. For the first time, the world saw itself not as small or fragile, but as brave. At the council headquarters, many leaders demanded answers. "You disobeyed direct orders," one official shouted at Elena. "You risked everything." She looked at them calmly. "We risked silence, and we won." The room fell quiet. Arya stood beside her, radiant and peaceful. "Your people stood when no one else would," it said softly. "That is what makes you strong. That is why you will be remembered too." From that day on, the relationship between humans and the Varelians changed forever. The council finally approved the colony project. Ships carried builders, scientists, and teachers to Varelian's orbit, not as conquerors but as caretakers. Together, they began restoring what had been lost. The glowing seeds from the mountain caves were planted in small domes, and within weeks they began to sprout. Delicate, crystal-like plants that sang faint tones in the wind. They were living memories, proof that even after destruction, life could return. And whenever the new settlers looked up at the sky, they could see the faint shimmer of the ancient shield still orbiting above them, a quiet reminder of the day humanity chose compassion over fear. Arya often stood on the viewing platform of the new colony, gazing at the stars. When Elena once asked what it was thinking, it replied softly, "I am wondering what the universe will remember next." She smiled. "Maybe it'll remember that even small worlds can have big hearts." Arya turned to her and said, "It already has." The sky above Virelion was calm again. The Syndic ships had retreated into the blackness of space, but nobody on the planet or in orbit believed it was truly over. Everyone knew they would come back, stronger and more prepared. The quiet that followed was not peace. It was the silence before another storm. On Earth, the world was still trying to understand what had just happened. News spread faster than ever before. People watched recordings of the Aurora 17 standing in front of an entire alien fleet and surviving. They watched as the old Varelian shield glowed like a living wall, protecting a planet that had once been forgotten. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't seen as the weakest species in the galaxy. It was seen as the bravest. But courage always brings responsibility. The Global Council met again, this time with the whole world watching. Everyone wanted answers. What did this mean for the future? Would the Syndic attack Earth next? Could the Varelians truly return? Elena stood before the council, calm but visibly exhausted. Weeks of little sleep had left dark circles under her eyes. Yet her voice carried strength. "We didn't start a war," she said. "We defended a memory, a promise that no one should be erased just because they chose peace." Her words touched many, but not everyone agreed. Some still feared the consequences. "The Syndic won't forget this insult," one delegate warned. "We've exposed ourselves to a danger far beyond our understanding." Arya, standing quietly beside her, spoke next. Its voice was gentle but steady. "You misunderstand. The Syndic already feared you, not because of your weapons, but because of your heart. They know what compassion can do. It unites those who have nothing in common. It destroys control." The room fell into silence. Finally, the council voted to continue supporting the colony on Virelion. Supplies, engineers, and research teams were approved for launch. Humanity would stand by its decision, not just with words but with action. When the Aurora 17 returned to Virelion weeks later, it didn't come alone. A small fleet of Earth's best ships followed, carrying builders, scientists, and volunteers from dozens of nations. They weren't soldiers. They were protectors, dreamers, and believers. Each one knew they might never come home, but none of them hesitated. Virelion itself had begun to awaken. The planet's surface, once covered in ash and ruins, now shimmered with faint light. Small patches of crystal plants had started growing where the Varelian seeds were planted. The air was thin but breathable. The sound of soft humming could sometimes be heard when the wind blew, almost like the planet was singing again. Arya explained that the humming was part of the Varelian energy field. "The planet remembers its people," it said. "Every seed carries a song. When they grow, the planet listens." The colonists began their work with quiet respect. No one raised tall buildings or heavy machinery. Instead, they used lightweight shelters powered by solar cells and magnetic generators. Every step they took was gentle, as if they were guests walking through someone's sacred home. For months, everything went smoothly until one night. The stars began to shift again. It was a small observation drone that first caught it, unusual heat signatures moving through deep space. Within hours, confirmation came. The Syndic fleet was returning, and this time, there were twice as many ships as before. The colony was not ready for war. The defense shield had recharged, but it wasn't strong enough to withstand a full assault. The crew of the Aurora 17 immediately contacted Earth, and a global alert went out. Every country on Earth that had once argued or doubted suddenly agreed on one thing. They could not let Verelion fall. This time, the response was faster. From orbital stations and deep space docks, ships launched in waves. Earth's United Defense Fleet, the first ever formed by all nations together, began its journey. These weren't battleships made for destruction, but vessels designed to protect and support. They carried advanced communication systems, defense drones, and the upgraded shield generators developed from Verelion technology. The people on board knew they might be flying into death, yet there was no fear in their voices. Instead, there was quiet pride. For the first time, humanity was not fighting for land or power. It was fighting for someone else's right to exist. When the Syndic fleet arrived, the sky around Verelion turned dark. Hundreds of black ships surrounded the planet like a storm of metal wings. The colony below could feel the vibrations in the ground. The humming of the planet grew louder, almost as if Verelion itself was afraid. Arya stood on the observation platform staring up at the sky. "They have come to silence memory again," it said softly. Elena placed a hand on its shoulder. "Then we remind them why they failed the first time." The Aurora 17 took position between the colony and the Syndic forces. Earth's fleet soon appeared out of hyperspace, spreading into a protective formation. The two sides faced each other, silent and waiting. Then a message came through from the Syndic command ship. "Human vessels," the voice said coldly. "You are protecting forbidden ruins. Withdraw now or be erased." Elena looked at Arya. "What do we say?" she asked. Arya closed its eyes. "We tell them the truth." Elena opened the channel. "We are not here to fight," she said firmly. "We are here to protect life and something your kind forgot long ago." There was no reply. Instead, the Syndic ships began to charge their weapons. The first blast came like lightning, a beam of red light that struck the shield dome. The ground trembled. The shield held for a moment, then flickered weakly. Inside the control room, alarms blared. Engineers shouted as they tried to stabilize the energy flow. "The shield is losing power." One of them cried. Arya stepped forward. "We can strengthen it," it said, "but only if we join with it fully." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "The shield listens to life energy. If I connect my core to the grid, it will remember its purpose again." "But," Arya paused. "I may not survive." Elena shook her head. "No, there must be another way." Arya looked at her gently. "You once said no life should be forgotten." "This is how I keep my people remembered." Before she could stop it, Arya placed its hands on the energy console. Light spread through its body like fire and water mixed together. The ship's systems roared to life. The shield outside suddenly flared, brighter than ever before. The Syndic ships fired again, dozens of beams crashing into the barrier, but this time, the energy didn't break. Instead, it reflected back. The attackers' own blast turned against them, striking their front lines and scattering their fleet. From every human ship, a cheer erupted. But inside the Aurora 17, the light around Arya began to fade. Its body grew weaker, its energy flickering like a candle in the wind. "Elena," it whispered, "tell them, the Verelions were never truly gone. As long as you remember us, we live." She held its hands as the glow finally disappeared. For a moment, the entire ship fell silent. Outside, the Syndic fleet began to retreat once more. They had lost their courage. The humans hadn't destroyed them. They had faced them with something stronger than power, faith and unity. When the last enemy ship vanished, the shield dimmed again, leaving only the calm blue light of Verelion shining in the distance. Elena looked out of the window, her eyes filled with tears. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You're remembered." In the days that followed, Earth's fleet remained near Verelion, guarding the planet. Arya's sacrifice became a story told across every colony and station. People who had never believed in unity now spoke of compassion and courage. The council declared Virelion a sanctuary world, a place where no weapon could be built and no life could be harmed. Elena stayed there, helping the colonists rebuild. She often visited the place where Arya's final light had merged with the shield. The ground there shimmered faintly, always warm, as if the planet still carried Arya's presence. Every evening, when the twin suns of Virelion set behind the crystal valleys, the sky would glow with soft blue lines, the same color as Arya's eyes. And on nights when the wind sang, the colonists swore they could hear a faint voice whispering through the hum of the planet. Years passed after the Great Stand at Virelion. The universe slowly began to heal from the fear that had ruled it for centuries. What began as a single act of courage, one human ship protecting a forgotten world, had changed everything. The story of Arya's sacrifice spread across every corner of known space. Even those who had once doubted humanity now looked at Earth with new respect. The Syndic, once feared and untouchable, grew silent. Their fleets no longer patrolled distant worlds, and their threats faded into whispers. No one had defeated them with weapons. They had been defeated by conscience, by the simple truth that compassion could stand stronger than power. On Earth, people spoke of Virelion with pride and tenderness. Children learned about it in schools. Artists painted glowing blue skies and crystal valleys. Musicians composed soft melodies inspired by the hum of the planet. And every year, on the day the battle had ended, people across the world would pause for a moment of silence, not for mourning, but for remembrance. The colony on Virelion grew into something no one could have imagined. Where once there had been ruins, now stood small towns filled with both humans and travelers from other species. There were markets where different languages blended like music, and gardens where the glowing plants from Virelion soil grew tall, their light reflecting on smiling faces. Every structure built on that planet carried the same inscription, a promise carved into stone. We remember. Elena lived there still. Her hair had turned silver with time, but her eyes still carried that spark of quiet determination. She spent her days walking through the colony's learning centers, teaching young explorers about the Virelion, not as myths, but as real people who had once sung songs to the stars. Many of her students were born on Virelion. They had never seen Earth, but they felt connected to it, as if the two worlds shared one heartbeat. These children often asked the same question: why did humans help a race they didn't even know? And Elena always gave the same answer: because helping someone who can't repay you, that's what makes life worth living. In one corner of the colony stood a memorial garden. At its center was a crystal monument shaped like a flame, glowing softly day and night. It was built to honor Arya, the last Virelion who had given its life to protect both worlds. People came from all over the galaxy to visit that place. Some prayed, some cried, and some just sat in silence, feeling the warmth that still radiated from the monument. It wasn't just a tribute to Arya. It was a reminder of every act of kindness that had ever changed history. One evening, as the twin suns set over the valley, Elena stood near the monument, watching the light fade across the glassy hills. A young engineer walked up to her. He had been working on restoring the old Virelion energy towers, ancient spires that once powered the cities. He said softly, "Sometimes I wonder if they still see us, wherever they are." Elena smiled faintly. They do. Every time we build instead of destroy, they see us. The wind brushed through the valley carrying a faint melody, a soft, harmonic hum that echoed across the plains. The engineer froze. "Do you hear that?" She nodded. "It's the planet remembering." Over time, Virelion became more than a colony. It became a symbol. Nations that had once fought over borders began working together again. Shared research programs flourished. The first Galactic Peace Summit was held not on Earth but on Virelion, the world that had once been destroyed by war and rebuilt through love. Representatives from dozens of species attended. They stood under the same blue skies where the Virelions once lived, speaking of unity, cooperation, and shared memory. No one talked about conquest. No one demanded tribute. For once, everyone simply listened. During the opening ceremony, a young woman born on Virelion gave a short speech. Her voice trembled slightly, but her words were strong. My parents were among the first colonists. I never met Area, but I grew up hearing its story. My people, humans, taught me that strength isn't about who has the biggest ships. It's about who has the courage to care. When she finished, the crowd stood in silence. Some had tears in their eyes. Because they all knew the war that had once seemed endless had been stopped by something as simple as kindness. Years turned into decades. Firelion continued to thrive, becoming a living example of what peace could create. The once dead cities were now alive with light and laughter. Blue rivers flowed again, reflecting the stars above. And every night, when the wind passed through the glowing trees, it carried a soft tune, the same song Area had taught Elena before its final moment. One day, while walking through the valley, Elena stopped at the top of a hill overlooking the colony. Below her, children played among the crystal gardens, their laughter echoing across the air. In the distance, ships rose from the port, some heading to Earth, others to distant worlds carrying the message of Firelion's legacy. She felt tears in her eyes, but they weren't sad. They were the kind that come from peace, the kind that say, "We made it." She looked up at the sky and whispered softly, "We remembered you, and we'll keep remembering." As if in response, a faint glimmer passed through the clouds, a shimmer of blue light that lingered for a moment before fading. Maybe it was a reflection of the shield, maybe it was something more. But in her heart, Elena knew what it meant. Area was still there, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as part of the world itself. Generations later, the story of the forgotten race became one of the most told tales in human history. But it was never treated as a legend. It was a lesson, a real story of what happens when one small act of bravery changes the course of everything. Children grew up believing in unity, not fear. They learned that even when the universe feels vast and uncaring, compassion can light the darkest corners. And every new explorer who left Earth to journey among the stars carried a small badge on their uniform, a symbol of the glowing Firelion flame, surrounded by 3 simple words: "We remember life." That phrase became humanity's new motto, a promise that they would never again let silence erase the innocent. 100 years after the Great Stand, a young historian visited the same valley where Area's monument still stood. The colony had grown into a shining city, yet the monument remained untouched exactly as it was. The historian placed her hand on the crystal surface. Feeling the warmth within, she closed her eyes and said quietly, "I wasn't there when you saved us, but we live because of you." The monument glowed faintly, just for a moment, as if acknowledging her words. Above, the twin suns shone across the rebuilt towers and gardens, casting their light across a planet once forgotten by time. It was no longer a graveyard of memories. It was a world reborn. And somewhere in the deep hum of the wind, a soft voice seemed to whisper through the air. "We were remembered." That whisper spread through the valley, through the colony, through every person who ever walked that ground. And as they listened, they didn't hear sadness. They heard peace. They heard a world that had finally been healed, not by power, not by war, but by the one thing that connected every living being in the universe: compassion. It had begun with a single ship, following a faint distress signal. It had ended with 2 worlds united by love and remembrance. The forgotten race had no allies, until humanity took a stand. And that stand became a light that would never fade.